Thank you for joining us for excerpts from the Tobago House of Assembly plenary sitting. This is the 40th sitting of the 2009 to 2013 session. Moving the motion in the House this week was Minority Leader Ashworth Jack. Assemblyman Jack's motion requested that the House agreed to identify, locate or designate a suitable portion of land to establish a Tobago's Patriot Cemetery. This cemetery would be the resting place for sons and daughters of the soil who have rendered human service to the island and people of Tobago.
The intent of this motion was quite simple, but I would also like to think very clear. As part of the, now as we celebrate the heritage, and part of continuing the heritage of our island, the intention is to continue to identify, Madam Presiding Officer. In some cases, some will be memorial to me, and some upon their demise. Some area where our future generations can be able to go to this place. Visitors to our island, to our country, can go to this place and see part of the history of the island in terms of the persons who have made contribution to the island. Madam Presiding Officer, a number of countries all over the world, in the Caribbean, in the case of Barbados and Jamaica, and St. Lucia is now doing the same thing, have taken the opportunity to be able to identify those sons and daughters of their soil who have made or have given human service and made some level of contribution that they consider worthy of praise. And yes, the issue of honoring people in their lifetime is very important. But in order for us to also continue to understand what contributions different generations would have made, it is also desirable that we procure or use piece of state lands, as the case may be, some area that we can identify and use for the development of an internment area for those sons and daughters. Madam Presiding Officer, I have had the privilege to have traveled to a number of places in the world, and one of the pride of going to some of those areas, I have seen it in India, I've seen it beside the Caribbean, I've seen it in Kenya, I've seen it in a number of places around the world. The latest one I think I was able to see was in China. And able to see the reserving areas that identifies the remains of a number of the illustrious sons and daughters of the soil of those countries. And Madam Presiding Officer, what has also become very evident about those is that a number of visitors to those countries see that as a place of must visit. In fact, there are some of them that are so well preserved that you're not even allowed to take pictures of them. And that is how sacred they hold those areas. And so today, Madam Presiding Officer, the simple request is for us as a people to identify some area, look at what others have been doing, maybe put our own local spin to it, and to create that internment area. Madam Presiding Officer, some of the areas that I wish to identify that can go into that internment area would be persons who have served in the military, attained high military office, or who have died gallantly in the military. Persons who have given exemplary public service, persons who might have died in natural disasters, floods, and maybe we could do memorial to them, persons who have had distinguished service in a number of areas. And two of those such persons come to mind. In fact, a lot more than two, but two I would like to identify that we can probably look at setting up memorials in that park. Two. One I would like to identify as the former slave Sandy. And of course, we all know the history of that. This gentleman who led a number of revolts in Tobago, and who the Sandy Hall was named after. And also a woman who was immortalized because of her exploits in the Belmano riot, in the person of TP. I've chosen those two at this point, Madam Presiding Officer, as I speak about memorials to them, because as it is now, no one can identify or even know the exploits of some of these people as it relates to Tobago. And the average Tobagonian don't know what kind of contribution some of these sons and daughters of the soils would have made to the island of Tobago. I am quite sure that persons who have traveled to Atlanta, Georgia, can still go to the Martin Luther King's family home and see it preserved in its pristine state. They can identify the internment area of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. They can do the same of almost every president, if not every president of the United States. And they are held with a certain amount of joy, in fact, and pride. In fact, Madam Presiding Officer, I'm quite sure that a number of persons would have availed themselves of the opportunity to have gone to the Arlington National Cemetery and to see how the Arlington National Cemetery is held, and to see on a daily basis the number of locals and visitors alike that visit the Arlington National Cemetery. Madam Presiding Officer, I'm quite sure that probably 2 years ago you might have also availed yourself of the opportunity to look at the Kenyatta's burial place or place of internment in Kenya. In fact, that is one of the areas that you can't even take a picture of. You're not allowed to take a picture of that burial site at all. But it is held in extremely pristine state, and it's seen as a source of pride for the people of Kenya. Madam Presiding Officer, in the last couple of years, probably 50, 60 years, we have also had a number of persons who have met their demise while doing gallant service. I'm quite sure our children will love to be able to immortalize persons who would have died as a result of Hurricane Flora, or the fire at the geriatric ward at the Scarborough Hospital. Madam Presiding Officer, I'm quite sure we also remember on 1986, during the cleanup campaign, persons who were volunteering to work. There was a truck driver who met his demise while doing yeoman service for the nation, volunteering to do that kind of service. And the same thing have happened, I think it's in the 50s, between the Lansfomé Bloody Bay Road, or Lansfomé Roxby Road, sorry. Of course, Madam Presiding Officer, as a small child, I also remember the incident of the the Nickel, that vessel that was burnt in the sea that created such, in fact, one of the first things that drew a lot of attention to Tobago as a result of a disaster. And I'm saying, Madam Presiding Officer, as part of our history, that we can set up memorials to these people within these banks. Of course, we have a number of illustrious sons in the soil that continue to give human service. And of course, if we are to believe the Bible, and I'm quite sure that we have all had experience that it is truth, that it is appointed to man once to die. So whether we like it or not, we will meet that demise. All of us will meet that demise. And this is so for all persons, and therefore this request is not unusual, or I don't see it as maybe as I know for me it's not controversial, but I think it's necessary. Madam President, we have seen, and let's look at one of the areas, the issue of Plymouth. There's a tomb in Plymouth that persons, that is a big issue. Persons from a lot of places around the world come to go to this grave, this tomb, that with the mystery tombstone as it is called. And of course, if I'm not mistaken, the issue of that area close to the Golden Lane area that also holds the grave of a couple of or former slaves, that is also a site that is frequent by visitors. And that happens all over the world. And therefore, Madam Presiding Officer, what we seek to do today is to create, in the case of Tobago, a recognized place, well kept. And I would like to suggest a lawn-type cemetery, managed and maintained by, whether it be the department that is responsible for parks and open spaces, or the Division of Tourism. And I'd also like, Madam President, to suggest that it must include in that area the issue here of an area, I don't even want to call it a church, or some open space that, or a bandstand, whatever we want to call it, that allows for the holding of service in that area. And of course, a large enough strip for military parades in the case of military funerals. And that is so, Madam Presiding Officer, because as I spoke earlier, about the issue of some persons who have served in the military. And of course, we also know, according to what station you held in life, some persons are given a military send-off. And so in putting that together, I'm also like to recommend that an area that provides for military parades also be put in. Madam Presiding Officer, let me also take the opportunity to make a suggestion. This suggestion, Madam Presiding Officer, in terms of space. Madam Presiding Officer, the King George Park, there's a 49-acre of military reserve that surrounds the Fort George, Fort King George, as we like to call it. And I think that if we do that, it gives support to the history of Fort King George, the military history of Fort King George. And this was reserved quite a number of years ago as a military reserve. Madam Presiding Officer, that also lends itself to easy access from a number of places. It lends itself to easy access from Otley Street, or from Fort King George itself, or from Backlit Gardens. And so because this area is already reserved as a military reserve, I think that will make some sense. It allows us to celebrate our heroes and to do that in a way that allows for some decency. Madam Presiding Officer, in looking at this motion, I sought to find the internment area of a number of permanent Tobagonians. And that had proven to be very, very difficult. And therefore, even our children, even if we must, as a matter of course, start teaching our children about the history of a number of Tobagonians who have made contribution, whether it be this generation or past generations, and of course in future generations. And as I alluded to earlier, a number of countries around the world have seen it fit to have areas that they can do that by being able to identify the burial area of a number of those heroes.
Responding to the motion was Assemblyman Claudia Grimm-Duke. Mrs. Duke said that while the motion was not a contentious one and the idea of a Patriot Cemetery is very significant, the feasibility of this must be examined before a final decision is taken.
As stated by the minority leader, this is not a controversial motion. Every country has a responsibility to honor its heroes. Honor our heroes for their devotion, their dedication, lifetime struggle, and sacrifice, which made us all free people and an independent nation. I'm positively sure in every Tobagonian's heart and mind, there's huge space for our illustrious sons and daughters. And Madam Presiding Officer, we in this administration have been keeping the light shining on our heroes. Madam Presiding Officer, the main objectives in honoring and recognizing our heroes, our illustrious persons of our communities, our society, would be to honor them appropriately when they are alive, to honor them in a manner that their exploits and their contributions will be remembered and appreciated for as long as possible and by as many people as possible after they are dead. And so, Madam Presiding Officer, as stated earlier by the minority leader, where buildings were named after people, he quoted the Sandy Hall building. We can think of the cemetery, Sir John Selby. Some people say Sir John Silvery. That is history. And some people say Sergeant Silvery. And so, Madam Presiding Officer, we can look historically at the PNM administration in the Tobago House of Assembly over the last decade. And we would note that we have made tremendous effort and breakthroughs in acknowledging and recognizing our heroes. Madam Presiding Officer, I can draw reference to the motions in this House, one of which speaks to the hierarchy of awards for our icons. Madam Presiding Officer, the Tobago Medal of Honor. We would recall the presentation to our contributions and the contributors like A.P.T. James, A.N.R. Robinson, and James Bigart, We would recall the Arthur N.R. Robinson Airport, the Victor E. Bruce Financial Complex, our streets in our communities. We all appreciate the naming of our streets in memory of our heroes, our hard-working people who have given their lives and devotion to this country. Madam Presiding Officer, we continue with our plans to enhance this issue and this process by naming public buildings and our streets and so on after our prominent figures in our society. Madam Presiding Officer, all of us would recall our tribute at all levels for our youth awards, our sport awards, communities, our divisions, our heritage, our contributors in the sporting field, tribute to them and our achievers such as Kellyanne Batiste and so on, Josanne Lucas, our Rennie Kwao, and so on, our younger people, Mark London, and those youth who are carrying the torch for people here in Tobago. And so, Madam Presiding Officer, we see this as very significant in the lives and for continuity and sustainability of our development here in Tobago. And so we in the Division of Health and Social Services conducted a rapid random survey to seek the opinion of some of our village representatives to inform the Assembly on issues of this motion. And Madam Presiding Officer, from telephone interviews we collected data from 40 village councils. 40 village councils were contacted, and we received a response from 75% of these councils, 30 of our village councils. And so, in assessment, firstly, 100% of the respondents felt that our heroes should be honored. And I'm sure all of us feel this way. Secondly, 83.3% of them felt that tribute should be paid to our heroes while they are alive, while 16.7% indicated tribute should be given both when they are alive and when they are deceased. Thirdly, the respondents were asked in what way can we honor our heroes? And 50% of the respondents stated that we should name something after them, which we have been doing, Madam Presiding Officer. And this included buildings, parks, library, street in their village of birth, or something within the community where they are living. And this was followed by 33.3% of the respondents, which indicated that an award ceremony be held, which we have been doing, Madam Presiding Officer, both to enlighten the public of the contribution made and to show appreciation to the hero. Less than 10% of the respondents stated that a book should be written on what they have done, or an ornament or tombstone should be made of their history and should be placed in our education system. So, Madam Presiding Officer, of the 75% who responded to our questions, 63.3% of the respondents indicated that they would prefer a public burial instead of a private one, since the contribution made was publicly rendered. However, only 30% stated that the type of burial received should be the wishes of the family. Madam Presiding Officer, in trying to analyze very quickly this particular information, we felt that while the Tobago Patriot Cemetery, the whole idea and the motion in terms of this particular idea is very, very significant, very interesting, but we must examine the feasibility before a final decision can be taken. We must examine the feasibility in feeling out with our people and listening to their the diverse views on an issue such as this. Then we feel very strongly that a feasibility a study should be done before a final decision is taken. Yes, Madam Presiding Officer, we know of parks in the rest of the world. For example, right here, the minority leader spoke of the National Heroes Park, Botanical Garden in Kingston, Jamaica, the largest open space at 20 hectares in size. And so this National Heroes Park features numerous monuments and is the burial site of many of Jamaica's national heroes, prime ministers, and cultural leaders. Now, in the Tobago situation, you know, any person, whether a hero or not, belong not only to the country, but to his community and to his family. And so these are some issues that we really need to look at seriously in terms of the wishes of the family, the wishes of the community, and of course the wishes of the church. As you know, we have the churchyard cemeteries, we have the public burial ground, and so on. So these are some issues that we really need to look at seriously, in addition to the fact, as you know, we have a scarcity of space for our cemeteries here in Tobago. So my position at this time, Madam Presiding Officer, is that when we look at our size, we look at the number of our people to 60,000, we need to come up with our operational definition of a hero. As we heard the minority leader when he spoke about some people making contributions and not recognized, it points to the fact that we really need to define what the people we are trying to identify and to recognize. Because as for me, all of our people in Tobago are heroes. They have been making invaluable contribution to the development of their families, to the communities, and to Tobago as a whole. So we need now to come up with a definition that would really give the credence to provide the kind of space to provide burial for our people. Madam Presiding Officer, we therefore need to continue to speak with our publics, with our people of Tobago, with this idea, and to come up with ways in which we can definitely create the sacred space for the Tobago icons. We would need additional information, additional insights that would really create the mechanism and the machinery that would allow for this Tobago Patriot Cemetery to be meaningful and significant for the people of Tobago and for the generation to come from our people and our children here in a sustainable manner.
At the end of the two presentations, Assemblyman Groom-Duke requested that the motion be amended. The sitting ended with the House agreeing to the amended motion as requested by Assemblyman Groom-Duke, which stated that a select committee be set up under the Secretary of Health and Social Services to examine and report on the feasibility of designating a cemetery for the burial of Tobago's icons or heroes. Thank you for staying with us. You have been watching excerpts from the 40th plenary sitting of the 2009-2013 session of the Tobago House of Assembly. I am Avian Parks.